Jamie O'Hara had his way. The richest club in the world wouldn't be in the Premier League. But anyway, yes, wow, what a change it's been this week for Newcastle with their new owners. And they have now become the richest club in the world because the amount of wealth in Saudi Arabia is coming their way in some ways. Now, it's interesting because you see the euphoria from the Newcastle fans, Cass, and rightly so, because they have been with an owner who had promised so much and delivered so little with Mike Ashley. And now they have this new ownership who have promised investment, not only to the football club, but for the surrounding area as well. And so there is this optimism about what's next for Newcastle. But it's not going to happen all at once, is it?
No. And just one quick point. It's really nice for the North East that Middlesbrough have got a really good owner. Obviously, you know, they've done a hell of a job there, hasn't he, Gibson, for a number of years. Yeah. For a number of years. Yes, they're in the Championship. Sunderland have got new owners with Dreyfus family that were part of Marseille. And now Newcastle got probably the biggest of them all by quite a long way. But it's not going to happen overnight. I think if you look at other clubs previously, obviously we're talking Man City and Chelsea that had the investment. What happened there was Blackburn, you can go back with Jack Walker, is that you probably go British. You try and fight by a few British players. You go after some of the players that might not be, and I'll throw a name out there. For example, like Raheem Sterling, who might not be first choice at City. Can you snatch him away from Man City to get him to come to Newcastle? You know, these are all things that British type players that you might get, and then you use the world market.
Why do you say go British first?
Because if you look at what Chelsea did and you look at what certainly Man City did in the early years, they went, I think people like Wayne Bridge went, didn't they, you know, to City. Jamie and Duff went to
Chelsea. So if I'm looking at Chelsea,
say Ireland and Britain,
when I look at Chelsea and Roman Abramovich when he took over in 2003, you're absolutely right. They brought in Scotty Parker, Damien Duff, Wayne Bridge, Joe Cole, Glenn Johnson. There was a
big signings.
Big signings and a sort of British spine, shall we say.
Yeah, I think City done a few as well. Didn't Craig Bellamy go City in the early doors and that? I'm pretty sure that he was one of the early signings.
Yeah, Craig Bellamy. Again, Wayne Bridge, Sean Wright-Phillips, Shay Given, a number of...
So they were all very good players at clubs they were at. And I think Newcastle would have to probably do a similar thing. Obviously, the world market. I mean, Chelsea then established themselves, I think, in, 2010-11, David Silva come to the club, Aguero. They started to build the football club, and then you go foreign, you add to it. And if you get an exciting player, go after the big clubs, some of the big players at big clubs, because you can get them. Once they sort of go slightly out of favour, but you still think they're a great player, I think that's a good idea to go down that road. It's not going to be overnight. It just won't happen like that way. You have to build a football club.
So does that mean, you know, like I say, there would be Newcastle fans reeling off a list of players that they're hoping in January they can sign? But does that mean someone like Kylian Mbappe isn't likely to come to St James's Park anytime soon?
No, I don't see that type of transfer. No, I think that, obviously if you're coming Newcastle and Real Madrid, you're not going to get him. You know, you're not.
Even if you're the richest club in the world that can offer now wages that are higher than they probably ever offered.
Kylian Mbappe was making a decision on Real Madrid. You know, that is it. You know, that was his idea a number of years ago, that he wanted to end up there. I think competing with the Spanish giants, even when they're having more difficult times like Barca, it still would be hard to win that battle, even if you paid them more. I think I do wonder how financial play is going to work out in all this, because you can only... Obviously, the club have to grow not only with the football team on the pitch, you have to grow internally as a football club, merchandise, revenue, So they've got to become a club. I don't know what their revenue was last year, 200-300 million, whatever. They've got to get to 500, 600 and 700 million. You know, Chelsea did this. I mean, Chelsea a number of years ago, and you know, I think of the club that I played for and the Chelsea today. They're not even comparable. Yeah, they're two opposites of clubs. And Chelsea, I think, were the number one shirt sellers about 5 or 6 years ago. Chelsea Football Club had their shirts sold more than any other club in the world. Really? For a period of time. Yeah. And you have to go back. I'm not quite sure which year it was, but that showed how globally Chelsea had grown. I mean, I take my boy to Bromley Football Club, and you know, man, Chelsea kits are there. It's extraordinary. You know, you saw there's a few Crystal Palace, because Bromley's not too far from that way. Odd Millwall, but it's loaded Chelsea shirts there, because a lot of the kids have grown up with this Chelsea machine. That's what it's become. City have done it brilliantly, and Chelsea have done it brilliantly because they've been dominating, if you really like, in the last decade, haven't they? Mm-hmm. They really have, the two clubs. So I think Newcastle has to be a slow burner, be opportunist, take the right players that become available. They are going to make big signings. That's clear. This is going to be the opposite to what Mike Ashley did, which is nothing really in comparison.
Well, obviously, when you reflect on the Mike Ashley era, you'll look at it and think he was just happy to be in the Premier League, and that was it. Didn't need to invest much in the side. And we know this is going to be a very different stance that this new ownership will take because they're here to shake things up, as I said before.
It is a whole structure of a football club, Nat. The infrastructure of around the club as well. The way you develop everything. Yeah,
which we've seen. Manchester City have done it brilliantly.
Yeah. Chelsea have done the same.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I laugh because I remember the club that I played for. Chelsea was a club that was struggling, mid-table below when I was there for the 2 or 3 year period. And we felt it. Arsenal and Tottenham were way bigger. You felt that. West Ham felt like a bigger club than Chelsea. But the idea was that Ken Bates always believed Chelsea could be the biggest club in London.
We've always talked about Newcastle being a sleeping giant. Where it is, the northeast, in terms of, in fact, the whole of that northeast area, I should say, with Middlesbrough and with Sunderland thrown in as well. It's a whole sleeping giant area because there's potential in that area for something great. But it will be, as you said, a slow burner. So they're not necessarily going to make their mark this season. It might take a couple of seasons, perhaps, to make their mark properly in the league. We haven't had time this morning, Nat. But if you looked at it year by year, saw the transfers and how they changed. Yes.
There was a period when Negredo come to Man City. Edin Dzeko played for Man City, but they were gradually moved on. I can remember that was their forward line of Aguero, Dzeko, Dzeko and Aguero, which was a great three. But it gradually becomes something different, evolving.
But with what I was going to sort of ask you is, with now what we know is happening at Newcastle and the potential of Newcastle, we know that Manchester City will do all they can to compete, as will Chelsea. I'm sure Liverpool will do their best. They're not in the same league in terms of the money, the wealth behind it all. But when you look at, and you said it, Arsenal and Tottenham, when you were playing, they were the teams in London especially who were the teams to beat.
More so Arsenal. Tottenham have always been sort of slightly behind. But
where will that put those two teams now in this discussion when we're focusing on the top 6 race or the top 4 race in seasons to come?
I always believe that there's new owners always in the waiting room. I think that, I've said before, and it's only my opinion, but I do think Tottenham will be sold along the way. And I wouldn't be surprised with, obviously interest with Arsenal. Major people in the world are looking at football clubs and putting huge money. This is no different from what's happened in the NFL, by the way. Investment has happened. There's been huge developments in America, not only in American football, but basketball. Franchises are huge, and that's what's happened to our Premier League. And hey, people moan about it. There's an awful lot of revenue that comes from footballers as employees, putting big money into the economy, and developing around these areas. These areas, Manchester has been redeveloped by Manchester City and United, what United have done as well.